Good evening. My name is Tony Landoltz. I'm your host and oversight to all of our 5 retail stores. I'm happy to have you this evening for our 2025 How to Open Your Pool webinar. And with us tonight is our friend and guest, Randy Darby. He has been our BioGuard rep for many, many years and knows his stuff, and he's here with us tonight to share it. So, Randy, thank you for your time in advance, and I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Welcome, everybody. How's everybody doing tonight? I hope well. We've had a couple of nice days of weather here in the Northwest. I live north of Seattle and cover the Pacific Northwest. And Tony and I have been doing these webinars now for a couple of years and have enjoyed them and had some pretty good feedback. We do record these, so if you want to watch it later, you can. We like to do these because we want to make pool care easy. We hate to hear people thinking about making their pools a flower bed and filling them in because it's too complicated. It really isn't too complicated, and we're going to try and make it simple for you tonight. And whether you've got a residential pool, I know we had some commercial pool operators signed up. We basically treat them the same. And Tony's going to be watching the chat. So if you do have any questions, just type your question into the chat box and he'll be able to relay those to me. I'm not going to be watching these in real time. So, hey, Tony, can everybody see my presentation?
I believe so. I can see it. Looks good. Thank you.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. So let's get started. So we call this Pool School. There isn't going to be a test at the end, but I'm going to keep it pretty simple. This is what I'm going to cover tonight. This will probably last 50 minutes, depending on how many questions you have. But this is what you're going to learn, and really what we want to deliver is so you can have some good memories this summer with your swimming pool. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the Pool and Spa House, BioGuard, the products that we sell through the Pool and Spa House. And then especially if we've got any new pool owners, I'm going to talk about the pool anatomy. It's real important to understand how the pool operates as far as how it can help the water quality. Then we'll get into what we call the 5 keys to pool care, the importance of water balance, the different pool care systems, whether you use traditional chlorine or have a saltwater system, or maybe you use soft swim, a few different ways to treat the pool. And then there's a few different things that we can do to even enhance the program a little bit further. So let's get started. And the first thing, as far as the relationship between the Pool and Spa House and BioGuard, the company that I work for, we've been in business for over 60 years, and we've worked with the Pool and Spa House for at least 40 plus years. And so you've got a good resource with Tony and his team there. They've got 5 stores in the Portland, Vancouver area, and they know their stuff. They train their people extremely well. And we only make professional grade products and we stand by them. So if you ever have any kind of an issue with any of our products, Tony will make it right, and we'll make it right with Tony. So please be confident in the products that you're using of ours. And so, and the key here is we want to make sure that you're not using too much product, too little product. So really, like the top bullet point, it says our promise is the right products, the right amount, and at the right time to make sure you've got good water quality. So I'm going to be going over tonight what we call the 5 keys to pool care. And some of these we'll go through relatively quickly, but when we look at operating a swimming pool, really we need all 5 of these. We've got to have good circulation. That's the amount of time that you're running the pump. I'll talk about that. It's real critical that we have good filtration, whether you have a cartridge filter or a sand filter, so we'll talk about that. Some of the cleaning chores, this is probably the least fun part of owning a pool, but a necessary part, the brushing and skimming and that type of stuff. And then the testing part. That's we kind of divide the testing part into the testing that you do at home, and then the testing that Tony and his staff do in the store. Some of the other water parameters that don't fluctuate that much, but at least need to be checked once a month. So we'll talk about that. And then, of course, the water chemistry. So really back to basics, the first thing is, there's really 2 types of pools: above ground pools, in ground pools. Then there's residential pools, commercial pools, and frankly, we treat them all exactly the same. It doesn't really matter. There's a few differences in how the equipment is set up, but as far as how we maintain the water quality, frankly, they're exactly the same. Probably the only difference in a commercial pool, the health department does allow a little bit higher levels of chlorine to be maintained, but that's frankly the only difference. I guess the other big difference would be typically bather load. You get a lot more people typically in a commercial pool than you would in a backyard pool. So here's our pool anatomy. And so we obviously have a large body of water. Everybody, in fact, let me get my little pointer set up here. So everybody's going to have a pump. Everybody's going to have a filter. Some of you may have a heater. Some of you may have an automatic chlorinator that's typically mounted after the heater. But everybody's going to have a pump and a filter. The other couple of components on my slide here, the skimmer, and I'll show a better view of this in a couple of minutes, but the skimmer plays an important function as far as that's drawing the water off the top of the pool. It's helping skim the surface. So you want to make sure you keep that basket that's inside the skimmer basket, that it's kept clean. That basically acts as a pre-filter. So we want to keep that clean. The other pre-filter that you have is on the front of the pump. We call that the Heron lint pot. I'll show a better picture of that in a minute, but inside there is a little basket. We want to keep that clean. That's another pre-filter to filter debris out before it gets into your filter, whether you have a sand filter or a cartridge filter. Important that we've got as clean a water as possible going into that filter, because obviously it's going to be picking up the real fine stuff. The other thing from this slide, a couple other things, is at the bottom of the pool, we call that the main drain. Most in-ground pools are going to have one of those. That's where the water is drawn from the bottom of the pool back to the pump. You've got the skimmer at the top of the pool that's drawing the water from the top of the pool back to the pump. The one thing that an above-ground pool typically doesn't have is that main drain, so you're not going to be getting quite as much water coming. Well, you're not going to have a lot of water getting drawn off the bottom of the pool. So sometimes we may, in problem solving situations, may have to kind of guide you to kind of create your own main drain with your vacuum head if you've got an above ground pool. The other thing from my slide is where the water comes back into the pool, the return inlets. If you have little directional eyeball fittings on those return inlets, you want them slightly tilted down at a 45-degree angle. We want to kind of drive the water down towards the bottom of the pool. We don't want them pointing up where we're shooting water out of the pool. That might look pretty, like a waterfall type thing, but it doesn't give good circulation. So you want them slightly tilted down at a 45-degree angle. So here's kind of a slide of how this works. We've got water. If you've got a main drain at the bottom of the pool, it's being drawn back to the pump, goes from the pump to the filter to the heater and back to the pool. It's just a big circle. And so some of you may have a heater, some of you may have a chlorinator. Those are other components that are on there, but this is the way the water circulates. Pretty simple technology, but it's important to the quality of the water to make sure we've got good circulation. And I'll talk about how long to circulate in just a couple of minutes. So the next thing is that this is a picture of what the equipment pad would look like in an in-ground pool. You've got your pump. That's the Heron lint pot right there. There's a little basket inside there. This happens to be a sand filter. You've got the multi-port valve that you use for backwashing and vacuuming to waste, that type of thing. This is a gas heater. This particular pool has a chlorine generator cell on it. Some of you might have an automatic chlorinator that's mounted right there. So the water comes in here, into the filter, into the heater, through the chlorinator, and then back to the pool. Pretty simple technology. And here's a little close-up of an above-ground pool. Very similar. Some of these pumps don't have a Heron lint pot on them, but this is your pump. That's a small little sand filter. Same technology that draws the water in, cleans it, sends it back to the pool. So step one in our keys to pool care is good circulation, and that's all going to be driven by your pump. So a couple things from this slide is we want to make sure that the water level, so if you're just getting your pool up and running, you want the water level halfway up the skimmer, and that little gate that's inside there, we call that the floating weir. That's what gives the skimming action, and that's what draws the dirt and debris from the surface of the water into the skimmer, into the baskets. You want to keep that basket clean as debris builds up. And this is a view of it, inside the pool, looking at that skimmer. It should be, the water level should be halfway up the skimmer. That little gate inside there, that should be kind of flopping up and down. That's what gives the skimming action that draws the dirt and debris into the skimmer. So as far as how long we should run the pump, we recommend a minimum of 10 to 12 hours a day, ideally 24 hours a day. We've got a pretty short season here in the Northwest, and the water quality is going to stay much nicer running at 24 hours a day. It actually puts less wear and tear on the pump, letting it run continuously versus stopping and starting it. And in this slide here, this shows how much water is filtered after so many hours. And so after 6 hours of circulation, only about 42% of the water gets filtered. After 12 hours, 84%. After 18 hours, 95%. And after 24 hours, 98%. This is why the health department requires commercial pools. They have to run 24 hours a day so that they're getting almost 100% of the water through there every day that's been cleaned. The chemicals are getting distributed properly. If you don't run your pump 24 hours a day, I guess my recommendation would be is anytime you have a water quality issue like cloudy water, algae, go ahead and turn it on 24 hours a day until you solve that problem. The reason for that is if we're only running it 8-10 hours a day, it's going to take a long time to get all that water circulated and filtered and cleaned. So if you normally run it 10 or 12 hours a day and for whatever reason get cloudy water or algae, turn it on 24 hours a day until the problem is solved, and then you could go back to your 10 to 12 hour circulation. Any questions so far? Tony, anything in the chat?
Nothing in the chat, but just as a reminder, at the top of your screen is that little chat bubble. Click that, and then you'll get a screen on your right-hand side of your computer screen there, where you can type in a message, a question, whatever, and we'll get it answered.
Thanks, Tony. All right, so that was key one, good circulation. Key two is good filtration. And there's 3 types of filters that we use in pools. This is a sand filter. This is widely used here in the Pacific Northwest. This is a cartridge filter. This is what's called a diatomaceous earth filter. So it is important if you're a new pool owner, make sure you know what kind of filter you have. Maybe even if you're coming into the pool and spa house and maybe need to order a part, write down the model number, what type of filter it is, and maybe if you're a new pool owner or moved into a house with a pool and you're not even sure, take a picture of it, bring it into Tony and his team, and they can help determine what type of filter it is and kind of guide you. But these are probably the 2 most common that we see in the Northwest are sand and cartridge filters, and these work extremely well. They pull out very fine particles. They do need some cleaning periodically. Those of you with sand filters have to backwash them periodically. I'll talk more about that in this next slide here. Here's a cutout view of a sand filter. And typically you have the sand, or some people use crushed glass. You have it about 3/4 of the way up the sand filter. The water comes in here and it comes over this diffuser and kind of splashes down over the sand. The sand picks up the dirt and debris. Down here at the bottom, these little tubes, so the water kind of flows through the sand. Down here at the bottom, these little tubes have slots in them that allow the water through, the clean water, but not the sand, and then the water goes back to the pool. Pretty simple. Water comes in here, comes over this diffuser, goes down through the sand, out the laterals, and back to the pool. When you backwash a filter, and those of you that have had a sand filter a while, this is the process of cleaning the sand, you might say rinsing the debris out of the sand filter. I'll talk about chemically cleaning them in a minute, but backwashing, when the pressure gauge up here on the top of this particular filter has a pressure gauge, and when that pressure gauge goes up about 8 to 10 pounds above the clean pressure, that means there's too much dirt in the filter. We need to backwash it out. And so the process would be, in fact, if you ever need real good instructions, Tony and the staff have some good instructions on how to backwash and chemically clean your filter in the store. Grab one of those when you're in the store next. But backwashing actually reverses the flow of the water through these laterals, takes that dirt and debris that's been floating on the surface of the sand and sends it out your backwash hose. So you typically want to so the process would be turn your pump off, put the filter in the backwash position on your multi-port valve, turn the pump back on, and the valves typically have a little sight glass in them with a clear glass. And when that water is clear, that means you've gotten the debris out of there. And then you turn the pump off, and if you have a rinse setting on that valve, you want to put it in rinse and turn the pump on for 30 seconds or so to rinse the valve out, then turn the pump off and put it back in the filter position, and now you're ready to go. And you've got that loose debris out of the filter that's been building up. Right. Those of you with cartridge filters have a pressure gauge as well. And when that pressure goes up 8 to 10 pounds above the clean pressure, it's time to pull the cartridge filter out, rinse it off, get the particulate out so that it's not all built up with debris. The filters do need to be chemically cleaned, and so because they're pulling out a lot of different types of debris, we would recommend twice a year chemically cleaning the filter, typically like the middle of the season, like the middle of July, towards the end of July. And then when you winterize the pool, these are the different cleaners that we can use, and Tony and his team can help you determine which one would be best for your particular pool. If you're on chlorine or if you're using soft swim as a sanitizer, they can help guide you which cleaner would be best. If you've got a cartridge filter, we just soak the cartridge filters in either any of these solutions, depending on what system you're on, or you can spray it on with this Clean It product, let it soak for a few hours, and then rinse it off. The sand filters, we've got specific directions on how to get this cleaner into the sand filter. It can either be added through the top of the filter or through the hair and lint pot. They've got very good directions on how to do this in the store, but this is important twice a year. This gets and if you didn't do this when you winterized the pool last fall, I definitely would recommend chemically cleaning the filter now, so you've got good filter media. And typically, Tony, how often are you guys recommending changing the sand or the glass in the filters?
Yeah, so a couple things there. Every 3 to 5 years for the change portion of that. You want to make a note too that when you do replace it, note in your records or take a Sharpie right on your tank when you're actually replacing, and that helps remind you when the last time you did change it was, because we get that a lot. Well, I don't, I just bought the house and I don't know when it was changed last. So that question pops up a lot. So do give good record there, but we also focus on the glass. When you come into our stores, you will see that we're only selling the crushed recycled glass. It is a great product. It's a superior product. It is a more efficient product, wider, sharper edges microscopically. So because of that, we're actually using 20% less. And a lot of these bigger filters, you actually are saving money because you're buying one or maybe even two less 50-pound bags of it. So so crushed glass is our focus, but every 3 to 5 years is when you want to replace it. So there's usage and there's some different variables that play into that, but certainly 5 years at the latest.
How about the cartridges, Tony?
Again, it depends on how you clean. I've had a lot of conversations even yet this spring where people probably have had them for a couple years, but they didn't either know about strip quicking or using a product like Strip Quick to shampooing the filter and drawing the oils and stuff out, or they just neglected and didn't do that. And so I'm recommending that the folks replace them, or at least get new ones, and we can certainly help with that, but get a new set, pull out the old ones, and then try and clean them and see see how well they clean. And if they're either not getting cleaned well or if they're past due. And Randy, I might be stealing a little bit of your thunder here, but cartridge filters have wear bands around them, plastic thin bands around it, and when they start to fray and get kind of frizzy, then that's one wear mark. Also, if you think that you clean them well, put them back in. In fact, it's best when you clean your cartridge filters, it's actually best to let them dry and relax, and they will filter better going in dry than if you put them back in wet. But if you don't see much pressure drop on your pressure gauge on the top of your filter, when you put new filters back in, that's another sign that it's just packed with oils and that sort of thing. We know that oil and water don't mix well. So when you don't shampoo that oil, the lotions, the deodorant, cosmetics, all those sort of things, when you don't remove those types of things, it just creates a wall and a barrier. Your pump's working harder, and you're just not getting good filtration, and you won't see a relaxation or a drop back to normal pressure on your pressure gauge. Long answer.
Yeah, good points though, Tony, because this is one of those areas that um, if somebody's pool water checks out chemical wise, where they've got good chlorine, the pH is good, but the water's cloudy, it usually comes back to something with the filter. So it's real important to have good filter maintenance to make sure you've got good water quality. The other thing from this slide down here at the bottom, this little Skimmore sock that's on the skimmer basket right here, this can be real helpful if you get a lot of fine debris into your pool. This will collect that because it's obviously a fine mesh, and that stuff's not going to get through the skimmer basket into the hair and lint pot on your pump and into the filter. It also has a component, actually a chemical called Miselex that absorbs body oils and suntan lotions, so that stuff doesn't get into the filter as well. So there's 5 of them in that little package, and so you just replace those once a month. You will want to check your skimmer basket a little bit more frequently because this is going to filter a lot more material, and you want to probably have to clean the skimmer basket a little bit more frequently. All right. So the next area is cleaning. Keeping the water clean, keeping the walls of the pool clean. And so on this slide, on the top right, the keys that I want to kind of concentrate on, we want to perform regularly vacuuming. And so that's, vacuuming as needed. And that's going to depend on how much debris you get into the pool. If you've got a lot of vegetation around the pool, we want to get that vacuumed up for several reasons. Obviously, the pool is going to look better when it doesn't have a bunch of debris on it, but also that debris laying on the bottom of the pool can sometimes stain the pool. It also can help consume chlorine faster. So the cleaner you keep the pool, the less chemicals you'll use. The other thing that's important is brushing the pool. We recommend getting your trusty nylon brush out, brushing the walls, the bottom of the pool once a week. Skimming the pool as needed. So if you get debris floating on the surface, skim that out. Kind of the same reason is any debris in the pool is going to cause faster chemical consumption. So keep that clean. And then the chemical cleaning, these couple of products on my slide here, the Off the Wall, that's a waterline cleaner. So if you've got any kind of a waterline build up, kind of a scum line or maybe a mineral deposit, you put that on a sponge or a scrub brush to clean the waterline. The Stowaway is a cover cleaner. So if you're taking your winter cover off, just getting your winter cover off, or when you take your solar blanket off in the fall, that's what we would use to chemically clean the cover. And then a couple of other things that can make life a little bit easier. In the last number of years, they've come out with some robotic cleaners, kind of like the Zumba for a pool. These are a couple of models that the Pool and Spa House, there's cordless and corded options. The thing I like about these is they really do 3 or 4 things. They vacuum the pool, obviously, that's kind of their main function, but when they vacuum, they're also brushing the pool. It's also filtering water, so you're getting some additional filtration. And the other thing that it does, it stirs up the water. So it helps with the circulation of the pool so that we're getting even better circulation, especially if you've got areas of the pool with maybe dead spots like the steps, or if you've got real sharp, 90-degree corners. This can be very beneficial to stirring the water up. So I know they're a little bit expensive, but these really make life a lot easier. The other thing that's relatively new, they also have a robotic pool skimmer called the Skimmy that's solar powered that will travel along the pool and do your skimming for you. So basically does if you've got an automatic robotic cleaner, it's on the bottom of the pool vacuuming and brushing, and at the top of the pool you could have a automatic skimmer. So that's keeping the pool clean. The next area is testing the water, and we kind of divide the testing into two areas. The testing that you're going to do at home, either with a test strip over here, or maybe you've got a test kit. If you're from a commercial pool, you have to use a test kit. And the most important test that you're going to be performing at home or at the commercial pool is the chlorine test and the pH test. The other test, like total alkalinity and calcium hardness and metals in the water, there's a bunch of other tests that I would recommend taking a water sample into the pool and spa house once a month to have them test for you, because those don't fluctuate that much. But the chlorine and the pH test, those are the ones that you really need to test at least once a week. If you're a commercial operator, probably doing this every 4 hours, but in a residential pool, at least once a week. If you're a new pool owner, a couple times a week. If you're a little bit unsure of how to test the water, bring your test strips or your test kit into the store. The staff at the pool and spa house would be glad to show you how to do those two tests and what to do if the pH is low or high, how to correct that. If you don't have any chlorine in the water, how to fix that. So it's pretty easy, but that's the only way you know how well you're doing. In fact, when a health department official goes out to a commercial pool, there's 3 things that would get the pool shut down. Not enough chlorine in the water or sanitizer if you're using something other than chlorine. And if the pH isn't in, it's got a fairly wide range, but if it's not in range, and if you can't see the bottom of the pool, that's actually a drowning risk. Those are kind of the 3 no-goes when a pool shouldn't be open. Not enough chlorine, pH being out of balance, and the water not being clear enough to see the bottom. And then over here on the right, you can see, we recommend bringing a water sample in once a month. They do free computerized water testing at the pool and spa house. They use a sophisticated colorimeter spectrometer that tests the water. Takes about a minute to run all the tests, and then they'll give you a computer printout of exactly what to do to get the water in balance. This is a sheet, kind of an example of what basically is a step-by-step recipe of what you need to add in the exact order, how long to wait. It takes into account all of the different water care products that you're putting in and how it affects the water chemistry. So I definitely would recommend bringing a water sample at least once a month. All right, so that was testing. And then really the last thing is the water chemistry. And we really divide the water chemistry into 2 areas. Water balance, which is this area right here that I'm going to talk about next, and then the different pool care programs like chlorine or saltwater systems or soft swim. Everybody needs to maintain good water balance, and this is what water balance consists of. pH, this is by far the most important factor you want to keep an eye on. These other ones like total alkalinity, this is certain minerals that are in the water that buffer the pH. Calcium hardness is kind of funny. We want to have actually relatively hard water in swimming pools, so we test the calcium hardness. If it's not hard enough, the water tends to be too corrosive. We also test another thing called total dissolved solids. When you bring a water sample into the store, this is a test that basically tells us how old the water is. And in some cases, Tony and his team may tell you to drain some water out of the pool. Frankly, a lot of times fresh water is probably the least expensive chemical, you might say, that you could put into a pool, and it solves a lot of issues. So they could tell you whether it might be a good idea to drain a portion of water out of the pool. We typically would never drain an entire pool. Especially if you've got an in-ground pool, there's some issues with water table causing some structural damage, so we need to be a little bit careful of that. And then this saturation index, this is kind of an overall view of water balance. And when you get a computer printout at the store, they'll tell you what your saturation index is. So that's what encompasses water balance. And these are the general parameters that we're shooting for. I'm going to talk about chlorine in a few minutes, but this is the general chlorine level that we want to maintain. As far as water balance, these are the three main factors right here. The pH 7.4 to 7.6, that's ideal. Total alkalinity, calcium hardness. One of the other things that we started testing for a number of years ago are phosphates in the water that can contribute to algae growth and some other water quality issues. So we do test for phosphates, and in some cases may have to reduce those if the levels are high. So the reason the water balance is important, really these four areas right here, these first two, equipment damage or surface damage, what can happen is if we let that pH get too low where the water is corrosive, these first two pictures on my slide here, this is the inside of a gas pool heater. This is the heat exchanger. It's made out of copper. And if we run very acidic water through there, it's going to start to eat away at this copper. In fact, I was talking to one of my customers down in Southern Oregon today, and they had a customer that their heater went out in less than a year, and it was because of low pH. And unfortunately, the manufacturers, even if it has if it's within the warranty period, if it's been damaged by improper water chemistry, that voids the warranty. And Tony, what's a heat exchanger run? Is that over $1,000?
Well, being on the retail side, we don't see those kind of costs with any consistency. That typically goes through the service department, but I'm guessing they're at least $3,000 nowadays. They used to be in the 15 to $2,000 kind of range, but I know they've gone up.
Yeah. So pretty expensive. So you want to, you obviously don't want that to happen. And it doesn't happen in days. I mean, we're talking about weeks of letting the pH stay low. So don't get worried if your pH is low for a few days. It's just leaving it low for an extended period of time. The other thing that it can affect when the pH gets low, over here on the right, this is a vinyl line pool. All these wrinkles, what happened is the pH got too low. It pulled out the plasticizers in the vinyl, made that liner actually grow and form these wrinkles. The pool didn't have wrinkles before. And so that caused and it's not going back. Once the wrinkles have occurred, they're there until you put a new liner in. If you've got a plaster pool, it can etch the plaster, or it can leave little pock marks in the plaster. That's from low pH. Down here on the bottom, this is a scale deposit from high pH. This is scaling that precipitated out onto a cartridge filter. That's what it should look like. That's calcium that's precipitated out that caused that scale buildup. It's almost like, clogging of the arteries. I've seen that happen in the plumbing lines before as well. So high pH isn't any better than low pH. So we want to keep it in the sweet spot, which I'll talk about in just a couple of minutes. The other thing that water balance plays into is your comfort in the water, especially your eyes and your skin. If the pH is too high or too low, you can get some skin and eye irritation. And it also affects how well the chlorine works. If the pH especially is high, chlorine isn't as effective killing bacteria and algae. So it's very important to how well the chlorine works as well. So on this slide, you see the pH and the total alkalinity. The reason that we put these in one slide is they are interrelated. The total alkalinity is actually certain minerals that are in the water that buffer the pH and help keep the pH from fluctuating so much. It's like the shock absorber for pH. And so we always balance that first. So if you bring a water sample into the store, they're going to typically have you balance that first before anything. Then we would adjust the pH. And what the pH is, you can see the little test block here. This is the pH colors on this test block. This tells you how acidic or basic the water is. If the pH is kind of a yellowish orange color, it's low. That means it's acidic and corrosive. If it's a dark red color, like up here in the test block, it's high and it's basic, and that makes the water scale forming. And like I mentioned, it affects swimmer comfort, and it affects how well the chlorine works in your pool. So pretty important to test that once a week and balance it accordingly. One of the questions that we get asked a lot is what causes the pH to fluctuate, and pretty much anything that gets into the pool. People, perspiration, that kind of stuff, kids swimming all day in the pool and drinking massive quantities of Kool-Aid, but you never see them go in the house. Some of those kind of contaminants. If you've got a plaster pool and you ever get that pool resurfaced, or if you have a new plaster pool, it takes a few months for the plaster to cure, and your pH is going to rise during that time. Rain will affect the pH. The different chemicals that we put in the pool can affect the pool. Not all of them are neutral in pH. The fill water, if you're topping off the pool, that may not have a pH in the proper range. Algae, if you ever get, green algae, that typically makes the pH rise. And if you've got a salt water system, that makes the pH rise as well. So that's why we have to test this pretty frequently and adjust it as necessary to keep the pH in balance. This is the actual pH scale. It goes from 0 to 14. If you look at your test strips, they probably test from about 6.8 to 8.2, so a pretty narrow range. This is the comfort zone that we're shooting for. So if it's ever below that, we have to add a chemical to increase the pH. If it's above 7.6, we add a chemical to lower the pH. It's that easy, and these are the problems associated with the pH being either too high or too low. The one thing you'll notice in my slide here is it indicates clear water. The reason we put that in there is when the pH is super low, the water might be extra clear. It might be super clear, but you're causing a lot of other issues where you've got eye irritation, corrosion, and the chlorine's actually dissipating too quickly. So we don't want that. We want clear water, but we don't want it because the pH is too low. Oops. So it's pretty simple what we need to do. If we test the pH, if you bring a water sample into the store and your pH is high or low, or your alkalinity is low, these are the products that we use. The low and slow on the left here, this is a dry acid, a safe dry acid that we use to lower pH and lower total alkalinity. Over here on the right, the Balance Pack 200, this is a product that we use to raise pH. And so on the back of the bags, or on the back of the bags, it'll give you the directions of how much to add based on how high or low your pH is and how many gallons of water you have in your pool. And so one of the things that's really important to know is how many gallons of water you have in your pool. And if you're maybe a little bit unsure, or if you want to have it double checked, if you can bring your dimensions of your pool into the store, so the length, the width, shallow end depth, deep end depth, the shape of the pool, Tony and his team can calculate pretty darn close how many gallons you have, because all of these products are added based on the gallonage of the pool. We don't want you to add too much. We don't want you to add too little. So the gallonage is real important. And then in the middle, if typically we use a lot of this in the Northwest because our total alkalinity, which is certain minerals that are in the water, is pretty low in the Northwest. So quite often at the beginning of the season, we're going to add Balance Pack 100 to raise the total alkalinity. That's going to make the pH stay much more stable. So pretty common that we're going to use that at the beginning of the season as well. And then lastly is the amount of calcium that we have in the water. And as I mentioned earlier, this is pretty important that we've got enough calcium in the water. Typically, calcium is low in the Northwest, so we typically need to raise it, because when it's too low, we tend to get etching of plaster, possible corrosion of equipment. The pool might foam a little bit more when the calcium's super low. And if it's too high, which is a little bit unusual in our area, but there are some areas, maybe well water, where it could be high, that can cause cloudy water and the chances for scale build up. So we don't want it too low or too high. And when you bring a water sample into the store, if it's too low, they're going to recommend a product called Balance Pack 300, which will raise the calcium hardness. And if it's too high and we can't lower it by dilute, because really the only way to lower calcium hardness is by dilution with fresh water that has a lower calcium hardness. But if you have well water that's just naturally high in calcium hardness, they'll recommend a product called Scale Inhibitor that will prevent the water from scaling up the walls of the pool and the equipment. So again, on this one and total alkalinity, these don't fluctuate very much. So if you get this adjusted at the beginning of the season and then have the pool and spa house test this once a month, they can help you keep an eye on the total alkalinity and calcium hardness. The other thing that we test for, especially if you have a salt water system or you've just refilled your pool, It's important that we have the right amount of chlorine stabilizer in the pool, so they will test for this in the store as well. This is what's called the cyanuric acid test. They'll make sure you've got enough of this, because when we have the proper level of stabilizer in the water, the chlorine lasts longer, and that we don't have to keep adding it quite as much when we've got proper stabilizer levels.
We'll have to take inventory of what we have.
Then the really the last thing that they'll test in the store, the amount of phosphates that are in the water. These phosphates come from a number of different sources, from groundwater, fertilizers, insecticides, bathing suits. And so phosphates can contribute to algae growth. So they will test for phosphates, and depending on how high the levels are, they'll recommend a couple of different treatments depending on if it's extremely high. They'll recommend zero phos. If it's kind of a lower level, they'll recommend Pool Complete weekly. Any questions on water balance?
Nothing in the chat. Thanks, Randy.
Okay. All right. We'll keep going. So that was water balance. So everybody needs to maintain water balance. The next area is really the different pool care programs that it takes to really maintain a pool. We're talking about chlorine, or a saltwater system, or there's a non-chlorine system called Soft Swim. And all three of them, whether it's traditional chlorine, Soft Swim, or the saltwater systems, we have a program called Mineral Springs. They all still have three components. We've got to have something in the water to sanitize the water and kill bacteria. And the type of bacteria we're looking to kill are called pathogenic bacteria that spread between people, that cause little skin rashes and ear infections, things like that. That's why we keep chlorine in the water. We also need to periodically oxidize, or what we more commonly refer to as shock the pool, to remove contaminants from the water. That keeps the water clear. And we need to put something in the pool to prevent algae. Now, chlorine does prevent and kill a lot of algae by itself, but its main job is to kill bacteria. It's better to put a preventative algicide in the pool that's going to take care of the algae and not, relieve the load of the chlorine from killing bacteria. So we're using an algicide to prevent algae and the chlorine to kill bacteria. And again, this is kind of a rehash of that, but sanitizer, shock, preventative algicide, and then there are some enhancers that I'll talk about briefly at the end that can make it all easier. So we'll start with chlorine first, and whether you use traditional chlorine tablets or granules, or even if you have a saltwater system, the key here is that this level right here, we want to always maintain a chlorine residual of 1 to 4 parts per million. That's going to be on your test strips, 1 to 4 parts per million. If we've got any commercial operators in attendance tonight, the health department typically allows you to go up to 10 parts per million. But that's the level that we want to maintain. That keeps the water clear, keeps it free of bacteria, kills a number of different types of algae, and provides the people using the pool with the expected environment of safe, clean water. That's the level that we're shooting for. So if the level is ever below 1 part per million, we don't want to get in the pool until we get that level up to 1. And if you think about it, this is a very low level. We're maintaining 1 to 4 parts of chlorine to every million parts of water. So very low levels does it take to kill bacteria in a pool. So probably the most commonly used chlorine, if you go into the pool and spa house, you're going to see a number of different types of chlorine, granule chlorine. There's all kinds of different chlorine. This is probably the most commonly used. It's a 3-inch tablet. We call these Silkguard Complete tablets. And these will keep the water clean and clear. They can be used some people feed them through, you can see in my picture down here, some people feed them through the skimmer. Some people use a floating dispenser. Some people have an automatic chlorinator. And so they'll feed these. And so the typical consumption down here at the bottom is 2 tablets per 10,000 gallons of water weekly. And that's during the swim season. When we get into the middle of June, July, August, you've got a 20,000 gallon pool. You should be dissolving about 4 of these a week to maintain that 1 to 4 part per million chlorine level. And it's kind of trial and error. Is you might start out with 2 or 3 tablets. If the chlorine level is always too high based on your test strips, cut it back a little bit. If it's always too low, increase it a little bit. So it's a little bit of trial and error. And just be aware that as the weather warms up, the water, excuse me, the water warms up and the pool's getting used more, you're going to tend to use more chlorine. So you may have to, as we get into July and August, may have to step up the amount of chlorine you're using. Just use your test strips to determine how well you're doing. The Silguard Complete tablets, these are not your average chlorine. You might call this chlorine on steroids, is that they have some water softening agents that make the water feel softer and silkier. They also have some corrosion inhibitors and some stain preventatives, as well as some algae killing crystals. So these are typically these are probably the most cost effective way to treat a pool is with a compressed chlorine tablet or stick. But if you go into the store, they've got some granular forms that you can just hand feed as well. But the key is maintaining that 1 to 4 parts per million of chlorine. The next step is what we often refer to as shocking the pool. And this is the removal of contaminants. Because if you think about it, we're running very low levels of chlorine. But as we use the pool, we get contaminants in the pool that actually need to be removed and oxidized. In fact, if you've ever been to a pool that had kind of a foul chlorine odor, that's typically from these contaminants that build up. In fact, if you bring a water sample into the store, they'll test for the amount of what's called combined chlorine in the water. That's what causes the water to have kind of a foul chlorine-like odor. Shocking on a regular basis will prevent that from happening. It'll keep the water clear. It'll help remove the waste from the water. And there's a number of different shock products they've got in the store. This is kind of our preferred maintenance shock. This is called Smart Shock. It comes in a 1 pound, 2 pound, 25 pound bucket. The dosage on this is once a week, 1 pound per 12,000 gallons. And this will remove those contaminants from the water to keep the water clear. It won't impact the water balance. If you needed to shock the pool, you can swim as soon as 15 minutes later. It doesn't need to be pre-dissolved. We would typically recommend keeping the cover off the pool for at least 6 or 8 hours after you shock the pool. The reason for this is actually removing contaminants from the water, and they actually gas off into the air. So we want to make sure the cover is not on the pool. If you've got an automatic cover or a solar blanket, we want those off the pool for a number of hours to allow that oxidation to take place. So that's step 2. That's keeping the water crystal clear. Again, once a week, especially when we get into middle of June, July, August, to keep that water crystal clear. And then really the last step is we want to prevent this from happening. This is probably most pool owners' biggest fear, is to get the green monster that creeps up. You do not have to get algae. I mean, this is typically, especially green algae, a lot of times happens when the chlorine level gets below 1 part per million. But algae is everywhere. It's constantly being blown, washed, carried into the pool. So we want to prevent the algae. Chlorine's going to help, but we want to put something in the pool to prevent algae, and that's where the preventative algicide comes in. So down here at the bottom, it says the key is to apply an initial dose to your pool when you open up the pool, and then we'll apply a weekly maintenance dose to prevent algae from ever occurring. And if you do ever get algae, we would want to put another initial dose in. If maybe ever you got a little bit behind on your pool maintenance and you got algae, the one thing here is if you do start to get algae, get on it right away. Maybe even bring a picture of it into the store so Tony and his team can take a look at it. The sooner you get on it, the faster you can get rid of it and the less expensive it will be. You get the green monster, it may be a couple $100 in a week or two of cleaning up that. So we definitely want to prevent that from happening. And so again, algae comes in from a number of different sources. Rain carries it in, dirt and debris, animals. They say 1 dog is equal to 50 people as far as contaminants. I'm not saying to not let your dog in the pool, but just be aware you may want to shock the pool after the dog's been in the pool to get rid of the contaminants that were left behind and add a preventative algicide. The pools are always under attack. So this is what we recommend is use a preventative algicide, and you'll see a number of different algicides in the store. This is the one that we typically recommend for preventing algae, and also if you do get the green monster, to kill it. And this will prevent all types of algae. In fact, we kind of group algae into 3 different categories by color. There's green algae, black algae, mustard algae. These will kill and prevent all 3 types, and works fast if you do get algae. Obviously, the goal here is to prevent it from ever occurring. And the initial dose when you first start up a pool is 8 ounces per 10,000 gallons of pool water. And then every week, 1.5 ounces per 10,000 gallons weekly. And then if you ever did get algae, this would be the treatment dosage, and use this along with some chlorine, some strong chlorine to kill the algae. Any questions on really these 3 steps we just went through? These are kind of the non-negotiable steps: keeping chlorine in the water, shocking the pool once a week, especially when we get into the majority of swim season, and then adding a preventative algicide. Any questions yet, Tony?
No, but I'd like to make a point. The summertime is when a lot of people like to use their pool, obviously, but it's also a time when people periodically take vacations and leave the home for a week or so. Highly encourage you, if you're going to be leaving for a week's vacation away from the home, triple or at least double dose your weekly shock and algicide treatment, and maybe up your chlorine a little bit, so that way there's an extra layer of protection while you're gone, because people often will not do that, and then they'll come back to a mess because their treatment's lapsed. So that would be one strong point. There is a question: if you have good water balance in a saltwater pool with cartridge filters, do you need to use a weekly shock treatment?
You know what? Probably not. The one thing in a salt pool is, because if you think about it, you're almost kind of shocking all the time. As that water goes through that chlorine generator cell, you probably would not need to shock quite as often in a saltwater pool. That's a good question, but typically you would not need to do that quite as often. All right. So that was kind of the 3-step chlorine program. There are a couple of things that we can do to enhance it a little bit. These you don't have to do, but this can make life a little bit easier. A few years ago, we came out with a product called Pool Complete Weekly. This is like a 3-in-1 clarifier cleaner. It keeps the water line clean. It has a couple of different clarifiers in it to keep the water extra clear. It also has some natural enzymes to keep the water line clean and remove non-living contaminants from the water. So the dosage on this is 4 ounces per 10,000 gallons once a week to keep the water extra clear. And one other product that can help as well, this is called Optimizer, and you only put this in once a year, and this will also help maintain proper water balance. It also has an extra layer of protection in suppressing algae growth that can help as well. Another layer to increase the water clarity. So a couple of different options here to help with the enhance the water quality with Optimizer and Pool Complete Weekly. So this gives you kind of a typical 12-week. I just use 12 weeks for a 20,000 gallon pool. You'd need about 25 pounds of tablets, 24 pounds of shock, a 2-liter bottle of Algae Complete, 1 bottle of Pool Complete Weekly, and 30 pounds of Optimizer. And I put this in just as a reference. If the pool does turn into the green swamp, this is kind of the typical treatment that we would use to treat an algae, where we're going to use strong chlorine, the Algae Complete, Pool Complete, 911, clean the filter. Typically over $200 to treat an algae bloom. So we definitely want to avoid that. All right, a couple other things there is. I don't know if we have anybody in the webinar that's using SoftSwim. This is an option. This is a non-chlorine option. It's an all liquid option. This is a good program for smaller above ground pools, smaller vinyl lined in-ground pools. It's all liquid. Some people are allergic to chlorine, so this is an option for those folks. It's still 3 steps, just without chlorine. These are the three components. The Soft Swim A is a preventative algicide that you add every 2 weeks. The Soft Swim B, this is actually called the biguanide. You maintain 30 to 50 parts per million. You typically add this every couple of weeks, depending on usage. And then you shock the pool once a month with hydrogen peroxide. This is called Soft Swim C. Every 3 to 4 weeks, you actually maintain a level of the peroxide in the water. This is a good option for smaller above ground pools. And then I know somebody mentioned saltwater pools. This is the other option that some people will choose to do. And probably nationwide, 50, 60% of in-ground pools are going in with saltwater systems. There's a few different types. These are just a couple of different brands that you'll see here. This is one for smaller Intex pools. But basically, the chemistry behind this is you put a very pure salt into the pool, and the salt water runs through an electronic device that's got a low electrical charge that has some plates in it that are covered with what's called ruthenium. It's a titanium plate with ruthenium, low electrical charge that converts salt water into chlorine. Chlorine kills bacteria, and some algae converts back to salt. That's why they call it a chlorine generator, because it keeps converting back to chlorine. And so pretty simple technology. There's a couple of different ways you could do it. We've got a program called Mineral Springs that Tony and his team can walk you through that's a little bit easier, or you could do the just regular pool salt along with shocking periodically, still adding a little bit of algicide and Pool Complete weekly or Optimizer. Basically, the salt system just is mainly taking the place of the chlorine tablets that you don't need to feed anymore. So this can be another option. These are some tips on what to do with a saltwater pool. A couple of things that we want to watch. We definitely want to watch the pH closely. The pH tends to rise on this system, so you probably never need pH increaser, the Balance Pack 200, but definitely would want to keep a good supply of low and slow on hand. And as that pH goes up above 7.6, add low and slow to bring it back down. As the person asked, you may need to shock periodically, not as often as a traditional chlorine pool. Maybe after maybe a heavy weekend of usage, you might want to shock on Sunday night just to clear up a lot of contaminants that people put in over the weekend. The other thing that's real important with a salt system is making sure that your stabilizer level is in the right spot. The chlorine that's generated with a salt system is unstabilized chlorine, so sunlight, the UV rays of the sunlight cause it to dissipate extremely fast. So it's important that we've got the right amount of stabilizer in the water. And then the other tip would be to chemically clean the cell once a year. We have a product called Mineral Springs Cell Cleaner. And what that does, you pull the cell off and you pour this cleaner into the cell. And if there's any scale in there, it will remove the scale, because it's pretty common to get a calcium deposit on those cells because of the high chlorine output and the high pH, that we need to keep those cells clean so they keep producing chlorine. Any questions on really anything? We're just about finished here, but anything as far as the chlorine system, saltwater, soft swim, anything, Tony?
No, not pertaining to chemistry.
Okay. And then really the last thing, I put this in just in case you ever get cloudy water. Right? Probably the two most common problems that we run into pools is cloudy water and algae. We kind of talked about algae, but if you get a cloudy pool, that's typically caused from lack of chlorine, maybe inadequate filtration, high pH. Obviously, we want to fix those. But if you want to speed the process of clearing up a pool, maybe you've got, it's Friday and you got a party on Sunday and you want to clear the pool up. These are a couple of options depending on how cloudy the pool is. So if you come into the store, maybe even take a picture of how cloudy the pool is, because they'll recommend one over the other depending on how cloudy it is. If it's fairly cloudy, they'll recommend this Pool Complete 911, which is kind of our rescue product for very cloudy pools. If it's just a little bit hazy, not as clear as you'd like it, Polishine Blue is a basic water clarifier that will help the filter pull contaminants out. So you've got a couple of options there for cloudy water. These are all the, I'll let Tony kind of chime in here, but these are all the Pool and Spa House stores. They've got 5 stores now in the Portland, Vancouver area. That's their website. I'm going to show another slide here in just a second with a couple of QR codes on them. But Tony, anything you want to say about the stores or anything else that we've covered so far?
I want to double back real quick to the early discussion about filtration, because I don't believe we touched on it. Your filters have a pressure gauge on the top of them, and it's very important to know whether or not you can trust what it's telling you, whether or not it's good and working properly. So you know that by shutting off your pump. When you shut off your pump, you relieve the system of pressure, and that pressure gauge should drop all the way, that needle should drop all the way to 0. If it doesn't, then that tells you your pressure gauge is bad, and at that point you don't have any good understanding of what's going on in your sand filter or cartridge filter. So do come into one of our stores and get a new pressure gauge. They are easy to replace. You just want to make sure you're threading brass into plastic, so you just want to make sure you don't cross thread that. But a good working pressure gauge is essential to knowing exactly what is going on in your filter. And also, just to again reiterate, we focus on the crushed glass. It looks like sand, but microscopically it has wider, sharper edges, so that's why it's more efficient, and we use 20% less of the crushed glass than we would 20 grade silica sand. So you can use either. If you do use sand, you will not find it at the Pool and Spa House, but make sure it's 20 grade silica pool filter sand. It's got to be the right stuff. And then the other thing I just want to reiterate too, Randy already touched on it, but bringing in a sample at least once a month is so helpful and critical, really, to us having a periodic snapshot of how your pool is doing. If you ever have any issues or concerns with your pool chemistry or just what's going on, we can look at those consistent tests as reference points, and then eliminate chemistry. For example, if you've always had great water, even if you've been doing this for years, if your water is always great and we validate that, then we can eliminate the chemistry as concerns, and we can look into filtration or circulation or other things potentially going on. So highly encourage, no matter how long you've had your pool and how comfortable you are with testing and such, we do highly encourage the at least monthly water test visit into the Pool and Spa House.
Yeah, good points, Tony. And I guess the other thing I'll say is we also do a winterizing school. So if you're a new pool owner, we'll be doing something this fall on how to winterize your pool properly. And the one thing along that lines, we recommend opening your pool as soon as you can in the spring and closing your pool as late as you can in the fall. The reason being is we want to open it up early so we can get an eye on it. You might not be ready to swim yet, but the earlier you can open it, keep an eye on it so it doesn't turn green. It's not going to cost very much. You don't have to circulate it 24 hours a day, but at least keep an eye on it. We kind of use the water temperature to indicate when to open and close. When the water temperature gets above 60 degrees and we're getting days in the 70s fairly consistently, we want to open the pool. When the air temperature gets down below 60 degrees in the fall, that's when we want to winterize. The reason being, the colder the water is, the longer the winterizing products will last when we put them in the pool. So just keep that in mind as well. Tony, you want to talk about the
what you see here, just as we close, to the right, first of all, is a pool care guide that BioGuard has published. You can scan that QR code and it will literally pull up on your phone, and you can use that as a reference point throughout your pool season. So highly encourage that. And then to the left there, as a thank you for tonight, we want to give you a free bottle of the 1 liter introductory size, if you will, or if you have small pools, it's a great size. But the Pool Complete Weekly, so we want to put one of these in your hands if you have not tried it already, and let you see the difference at no cost to you as a bonus gift for attending tonight. So if you scan that QR code there, the big one in the center of your screen, that will give you a digital coupon, and you can bring that, either take a picture of that, or you can actually download that code to your digital wallet, your Google Wallet or your Apple Wallet. You can actually download that coupon right to that that section in your phone. But at least if you bring in a picture of that, we will honor that without question and get a free bottle into your hand. So we want to thank you for tonight. This is, Randy and I enjoy doing this. No matter how many people do connect with us when we do these things, the information is good, sound, yet simple, as Randy said. We want to keep things simple, and people always get a ton out of these things. And so we enjoy, equipping you and helping your summer be that much more enjoyable because you're not dealing with problems. So come in and see us at any of our 5 stores, Westland, Vancouver, Gresham, Tigard, and Selwood. And come in and see us, talk to us about any questions you might have. Make sure we're testing your water and helping you keep that pool clean and clear and enjoyable. So Randy, I want to thank you again for hosting this tonight. And as always, it's a pleasure, and we're grateful for you and what you do for us. So
Oh, you're
thank
welcome,
you, everybody.
Tony. Thanks for attending, everybody. Have a good evening.
Yeah, have a great night. We'll see you soon.